I want to begin, though, with basketball because Jovan Buha, right? Like the devil is not only in the details, but it's way more fun to talk about teams that underachieve than celebrate the success of the Lakers, right? It's the stories that come out afterwards now that the dust has settled. Like, I mean, look, Kobe Bryant, even after he died, for there was just the mourning was for 2-3 weeks. And then some of the stories of Kobe were amazing that came out in a positive way, right? But when something goes bad, like, man, I love to know the sports CSI, if you will, right? The sports CSI is amazing. And this is what I mean by it. When you see a car crash on the side, there's always the guy who's got to measure, well, here's where the brakes were, and they got to kind of figure out they take eyewitness testimony and what did you see? What did you see? What did you see? Jovan Buha says that Kawhi Leonard and Paul George were the only players to have their own personal security guards and trainers. I'll get to why that's odd. Leonard and George had power over the team's practice and travel schedule, leading teammates to believe that Leonard canceled multiple practices. Yeah, I'm not going to make that one. Leonard was allowed to live in San Diego. That's a schlep, right? Kobe lived in Newport Coast, which is 10 minutes further than where I live. But now Kobe had the Mamba chopper. And I don't believe that Leonard used the chopper nearly as often as Kobe did. And obviously, after Kobe's chopper crash, anybody would get hesitant over that. Leonard and George typically didn't speak to the media until at least 45 minutes after the game concluded. Under the guise of post-game treatments and workouts, this usually resulted in their teammates speaking with the media first and for longer, essentially becoming the public voices of the team. Teammates also believe that Leonard and George were able to pick and choose when they played. Not only did they sit out games entirely, but also they accepted or declined playing time in the moment. Do I think this is why they lost? No. I don't think it's the sole or even primary reason that they lost. Okay? You walk into a home and you're like, yeah, this is here and doesn't make sense, and I got to go through here. And if you've looked at enough homes, you've walked in and gone like, this layout, I can't do it. Doesn't work for me. And oftentimes, whether it's the price or the location, 3 keys to real estate, the price, the location, maybe there's a smell, right? Or you're underneath the runway. Like, those are the reasons for the value of the house. But what the foundation of that house is what everything else is built upon. Fair? And the foundation of the Clippers was supposed to be this great chemistry, this level of toughness, this level of cohesion. That they were able to overachieve with lesser parts, then you add in the better parts, and suddenly you get the chemistry of an underman team with the talent of a talented team, and it comes together, and Viola, you have yourselves the championship team. And players will get away with whatever someone acquiesces to. They really will. And players are much like, if you raise kids, you know that the hardest thing for kids to hear is one word, no. Tell them no, and they lose their mind. And that's what should have been told to Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. Look, the reason they lost in the bubble was they had a bunch of dudes that weren't all in on, like, who do you think they're getting rid of? Montrezl Harrell, did they get rid of him because of his attitude? No, he played hard, but it's not like he's a great rebounder or some unbelievable shot blocker. He's just an energy guy. That's what he is. That's what he is. But there are flaws to him in that he's not a particularly good defender at the rim. He just doesn't do that. And I would say, Lou Williams can be had. Why? Lou Williams is underpaid in terms of his statistical production. But Lou Williams going to a strip club to get wings when he was strictly told, don't stop anywhere, just go to whatever funeral you want to go to and then come back, only signifies he wasn't about winning. He was about Lou Williams, which is who he's always been, which is fine, but that's not part of a championship culture. And that kind of goes to the Clippers just don't get it. Whoever in management signed off on this, whoever said it was okay for players to be able to determine when they practice, when they don't, when they play, when they don't, when they travel, when they don't, you don't understand what a championship culture makes. And in addition to being the opposite of what you thought the Clippers were, isn't it the opposite of what you thought Kawhi was? Or the image of Kawhi? He's this blue-collar, tough, hard worker, quiet, doesn't say anything. Because, look, I could flip a couple of these things. Leonard and George not talking to the media, that's fine. That actually gave more attention to Patrick Beverley and to Lou Williams and some of these other guys that, frankly, want that attention. The not playing some games, you can spin that into, hey, everybody, this way everybody gets their stats, everybody gets paid. The problem was that they just didn't have enough time together to build good enough chemistry together, and this was the foundation that was laid. Or maybe it's not even the foundation. This is the floor plan that was flawed. And while the selections of tile and the selections for that backsplash and the colors or the backyard, but the fact is that when you ever walked into a house and the master bedroom's upstairs and the kids' bedrooms are downstairs and you got little kids, that's a non-starter. That's what this is. And look, stars almost always get a little bit more than, Michael Jordan used to play golf the day of games. 36 holes, 54 holes the day of games. So winning does cure all. I'd be like, well, yeah, he played 36, but then he dropped 55. So what are we going to say? And he was at every practice, and he never missed a team flight. And he was, he always, always had the tie perfectly done, which apparently he couldn't tie a tie. If you watch remember the Last Dance? But all of these things, winning can cure. But as we dissect the body of the LA Clippers of 2020 at what went so wrong from such a talented team, we knew it was the chemistry, and this is kind of the foundation that was laid, which is Kawhi Leonard and Paul George were given star treatment. And I think the biggest flaw is when you give star treatment to guys who don't have sweat equity with the club, that's a really hard one. When you give carte blanche to guys who not only don't have sweat equity, but that goes counter to what you thought you were building and what they enjoyed about the culture, that's a hard one for guys to overcome. And then they didn't deliver, which only makes it worse. Because my guess is that Kawhi probably had many of these same requests when he was in Toronto. I'm sure they discussed whether he played or didn't play and his depth of minutes in Toronto. The difference was they won a championship. And those of us who pay attention know that they only won a championship because Golden State, essentially everybody important was hurt, and they still took him to 6 games. But you win a championship and you're like, it's worth it. Stars getting star treatment is nothing new. But we were told that, and this is like Brooklyn last year, Brooklyn this year. The reason Kyrie and then Kevin Durant wanted to join the Nets was not just location and Kyrie growing up a Nets fan, but, man, they sure seem to have fun and play for each other and have great culture. So then we're going to bring you in and do something opposite? I mean, okay. Sure. Got it. Fascinating stuff. And it's been done in the NFL. I've told you guys this story before, but sometimes it gets lost. Where there was a year there where Tom Brady was allowed to fly a helicopter in and out of games. If you've ever been to Foxborough, Massachusetts, to Patriot Place, it's like the worst traffic on earth. So it made sense. He's a star. But guys on the team were like, nah, that doesn't work for us. And eventually somebody went to him and shut it down. Right? This is part of what laid the foundation of why Brady left New England. Right? Own trainer. He was able to bring Alex Guerrero onto the site of practice, have his own office. Because what inevitably happens is that relationship goes bad with somebody. So the idea of acquiescing to stars that much so that they make decisions or they do things that ends up not sitting well with teammates isn't ultimately the reason you lose games. You lose them because you don't make a shot, or you don't have an assignment, but it does lay a bad foundation. And a bad foundation or a bad floor plan for a house is almost always unable to overcome. Or maybe you can overcome it, but you'll never get the true value out of it. You can have the best, be end of a cul-de-sac in the best school district, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If you got a bad foundation, you got a cracked foundation, or one that wasn't laid right, nobody's going to want that house. You can redo the kitchen anytime you want.